Alright, what's up guys? I had to stop and do like an emergency video because check that out. I don't know if you can see it. 5,000 miles. So now it's time for my 2017 Ninja 1000 5,000 mile review. Technically, if you count both bikes, I'm up to 6450, but who's counting? So it's hopefully it's pretty quick. And hopefully I get everything I want to say in, because I really don't want to reshoot this video because I don't want to. So I'm going to try to do a top down, front to back type review. It's not going to be very technical. There's plenty of technical reviews out there for this bike. This is going to just be me as an owner giving my impression of the 2017 Ninja 1000, especially coming from a 650, this being my first 4-cylinder. Also, my first experience on a 1000cc class leader bike. It's got approximately 1043 cc's, so it's basically a 1050, but it's a leader bike. None the same. So, top down, front to back. Let's start at the top. We got the basic ergonomics of the bike. This is the first bike also I've ever owned that's had clip-ons. My 06 650 and my 13 both had the classic W-shaped handlebars, and they gave a pretty good arm position, and this bike does the same. The clip-ons are set pretty high comparatively to what you would see on most super sport type bikes. Also, I changed the levers for brake and clutch lever, and I adjusted them forward and down a little bit, just because I don't like to have my levers directly in line with my fingers like this. I like to have them down. It takes a little bit of stress off my hands, and it also, to me, supports this sitting position, because ergonomics of this bike help you keep from getting that rider fatigue when you're leaning on your palms and your hands start to feel numb, and all that stuff is because you're, a little more of a hunched position. I'm not fully upright. I am not fully tucked. I'm in between maybe a super sport and a cruiser type bike. This is a sport touring bike, emphasis on the sport per Kawasaki, but they also don't slack on the touring aspects, because I could ride this thing pretty much all day. Of course you're going to get saddle sore, but that comes with riding in general. So now that we got the handlebars under control, all the controls, to be exact, are pretty close. Standard position for any sport bike. It's got a clip, a switch for the hazard lights, rather than the normal push button release and activate hazard lights. So that took a little while to get to. It's got a pass switch on the front. It's got the normal controls on the right for run and start and your emergency shutoff. So the only thing I don't like about this is this brake reservoir. I don't like the design of it. My buddy on his Z1000 has a dark black hard plastic one that looks pretty cool. Yeah, I can switch it out, but this is the stock one that comes with the Ninja 1000. The tank itself is pretty wide. It makes for a good squeeze when you're trying to take corners, or if you're just sitting and relaxing on the bike. It's not so thin as to where your thighs are getting fatigued, stressed, and you don't feel like you're trying to carry a freaking cherry in your butt like you're getting hazed or something. It's very nice, especially with the tank grips that I put on here. That's why tank makes riding this bike really easy. The seat's wide to support my birth and hips. It's got a really nice feel to it. It's got 5,000 miles worth of riding on it now, so it's kind of broken in. It's not too loose, and it's not stiff either. It as any new seat would be. It was stiff when I first started riding it, but it's pretty much right. It's perfect, and it doesn't feel like it's going to break anymore. It feels like it's going to keep the consistency it's got. The passenger seat isn't used that much. My wife doesn't ride with me too much, but when she doesn't like it because it's a hard seat. But she hasn't broken it in, and I'm not too sure if I'm allowed to let anybody else break it in for her. Haven't run over that yet. So as for the ergonomics and the seating and the comfort of the bike, you really can't beat it too much. It's a very easy bike to ride. Now, as for the power of this bike, it's very powerful. It's approximately, 40% more powerful than my 650. It's got a very snappy throttle, but it has a very smooth throttle. The 650 was very torquey. This one has enough torque, don't get me wrong, but the 650 gave you a good amount of torque when you snap the throttle up, but when you roll off the throttle, it gave you that same amount of torque coming back down. So occasionally I would come to a stop, roll off the throttle quick, and all that torque would kick in, and that twin would slap me up against the tank, and I always had to compensate for that. Like, look at that, roll off the throttle, roll off the throttle. It's very smooth in its deceleration. The 650 would slap me up around. Looks like a bucking Bronco sometimes because that thing was real torquey. As for roll-ons and roll-offs during like a speed test, what's this guy doing? The bike is very responsive. I find myself very rarely, if ever, having to downshift from 6th to 5th if I want to give it a go on the highway. Also, this bike doesn't strain. My 650 on highway speeds, once you get used to your bike, you can tell if you're maxing it out. Not when I'm just speeding, or if it's just you're keeping a constant speed on the highway and the thing is right at the peak of, hey, I'm almost redlining, or you're almost trying to max out the peak of the bike. This bike, if I'm cruising at 70, 80, it doesn't take much more for me to get to 100. You know, it doesn't take much for me to have to pass a semi-truck or anything else that's on the road, where I'll roll on in 6th gear and don't have to worry about shifting down unless I'm at the very beginning of the RPM range where I pretty much got no power. I'll have to shift down. But if I'm rolling at highway speed and I need to zip around somebody, boom, this thing is gone. No question about it. My 650, I would have to kick it down to 5th just to take it up a notch and get around something and be good to go. Not to say that I haven't done that on this bike, but that's just, you know, when I'm in show-off mode. It's got no problem going. And as for riding on the highway, it's got this 3-position adjustable windscreen. It's in its highest position right now. It basically shoots all the air over my helmet. Hey buddy, how you doing? The second position, which is a slightly sportier mode, basically pushes the air like midpoint between my helmet right into my face shield. And then the lowest position, which makes it look like a super sport, basically I'm getting whipped all around the face with air. It's pushing it into my neck. I don't really like riding that way. Sometimes I do like to change the way the bike looks, because it does give it a sleeker look, and I've actually been complimented on the looks of this bike quite a few times by other riders, Harley and sport bike rider, or not specifically Harley, cruiser and sport bike riders alike, and a couple normies, like regular people, will compliment me on the looks of this bike. Not a lot of people have seen this bike around. It's pretty rare. I'm pretty sure I still got the only one in the Detroit area. I haven't seen another one. A lot of people sleep on the Ninja 1000. I don't know why. Speaking of looks, this thing is pretty. It's a very pretty bike. It's got some smooth curves along with some sharp edges. They did a real good job of combining the way this thing looks. It almost looks like one of those Japanese anime bikes. It looks very futuristic. It's got a dual LED brow light system, so each side of the bike has LEDs that are on. And also Kawasaki opted for the dual headlights at all times, as most riders tend to see. And usually Japanese or Asian sport bikes have one light on, one light off. One light is the running light, the other light is the high beam. And most people get confused by that. They say, hey man, you got a light out. No, I don't. It's just how this bike's made. This bike opted for dual headlights at all times, and it's also got dual high beams when you try to initiate the high beams. So it really looks good just out the gate when you come look at this bike. It's got let's see, let's go. We already did the top. We're going down. We did the front. Let's make it back towards the tires. We're going a little farther down. It's got 300 millimeter rotors, along with dual brake calipers in the front. Plenty of stopping power for this beast. The tires are 120 70/17, pretty standard for most sport bikes for the front tire. Slide back towards the middle of the bike. You got the foot pegs that are pretty comfortable position. They're not all the way back where my heels are directly behind me. They're pretty much under me, as if I was sitting maybe in a lawn chair. It's a very relaxed position. There's not too much stress on my legs. I can stretch them out if I want, and it's not a big deal to worry about. Going back a little farther, you got the tailpipe positions with their low mount. They're not high mount like some of the more noticeable sport bikes like the CBRs and the R1s, GSXRs. You know, they have a higher mount exhaust system. This one's got dual exhaust, both low mount, and I love the way they look. The rear tire is a 190 55/17. It's a bit bigger than my 650 was because this is 1,000. It needs more surface area to move all this weight and put all that power to the ground. And speaking of weight, this is about 50 pounds heavier than my 650. This weighs in at about 516 pounds wet. My 650 was about 466, something along those lines. So this is she's a little bulky, but it's just more power to push that bulk around. Oh, and for those of you that don't know the 120 70/17 deal, it's 120 millimeters. It's the distance between both sides of the tire, the top surface area that the tire rides on the road, and that's how wide your tires are. And the 70 is the depth of the tire, how far the tire, how thick the tire is basically from the rim to the edge of the rideable surface. So a lot of people get confused by that. So it rear tire is 190, so it gives it a lot of surface area around that curvature for the tire. What else? Gas tank. We talked about how wide it is, but let's talk about how big it is. It's 5.1 gallons. She's not too thirsty. She does about 40 miles per gallon, and it's not a huge deal to fill this puppy up. Gas mileage is what's expected for 1,000, and I think personally a little better than what you would normally see out of most super sport bikes. They just burn through gas. It's crazy. This thing is sport touring. It's meant to be able to withstand long road trips, so I had to fill up quite a bit less than most of the guys I ride with, unless I'm just riding really aggressive. Oh, I forgot the mirrors. The mirrors are pretty wide. They're about shoulder width apart for a guy of my stature. I'm 5'8", so my wingspan isn't too big. The shoulder width apart of the edge of the mirrors allows me to see around me, and I always just throw those low blind spot mirrors on everything I own. Anybody who rides my bike, they don't really like them too much, but I'm used to them. I know how to see through them, and I like them because I can see all kinds of crap. Let's see, what else can I talk about this beast? It is a beast. It howls. Right around 6,000 RPM, it starts to get a little louder than normal. Like right now, you hear a nice low buzz or hum, and right around 6K, this thing starts to actually howl. I can't make the sound. I'm not going to attempt to, but that's with the cat on it. I haven't taken that off yet, but with the cat on it, this thing howls around 6K. I technically can't get fast enough to do that right now, but you just have to take my word for it. So all in all, I really like this bike. It's a different feel from the 650 and a two-cylinder. This 4-cylinder, the response is smooth. It's much different, and this is a great bike to ride. This is a beginner bike? Absolutely not. This bike you have to grow to appreciate, and I feel like me coming from the 650s up to this thing, I have a greater appreciation for the bike and how it performs, and it performs great. And the Twisties, forgot to talk about the Twisties. I can take this thing in corners, and I feel like this bike has much more ability than I do. I don't think I've pushed this bike to the point where it was beyond what this bike can handle as far as traction and response in a Twisty. It is a sport bike with touring features. It's freaking awesome. I've dipped this thing over on some pretty hard lean angles, and I gotta say, it wasn't phased. It just looked at me like, wake me up when you're done, buddy. So that's pretty cool. It's got the instrument cluster. Forgot about that too. Instrument cluster is a little busy. It's easy to see in direct sunlight, and it's also easy to see at night. The brightness is pretty much perfect where it's not too bright, but you can't change the contrast at all. And the weird thing about this instrument cluster is it either has to be in direct sunlight or in the shade. If there's a mix, like if half your screen's in the shade and half of it's in direct sunlight, it gets really weird to look at. Plus, if you're not used to riding this bike, you'll get confused. It's busy. It's got the tachometer, It's got the gear indicator, it's got the time, it's got the fuel gauge, it's got the heat of the bike, the temperature gauge, it's got your speedometer, of course, it's got the mileage, it's got your miles per gallon, and you can change it to the temperature, so you can tell what the temperature is outside because it's got a temperature gauge on it. Oh, and it's also got this tiny little eco mode thing that pops up to let you know if you're riding within the economical tolerances of your RPM range. If you're too high in the RPM, you're burning too much gas, eco light goes out. When you're in a good RPM range, eco light pops back on. So sometimes you catch that out the corner of your eye, it'll throw you off till you learn to ignore it, and you don't spend too much time looking down at the screen. But it's in great position with your eye line to be able to see it when you need to see it, and also ignore it when you need to ignore it. So I guess that's it, guys. This was a quick and dirty review of how much I like this bike. I would definitely recommend it for those of you who are looking to try a 1000cc class bike and don't want to necessarily, travel through time on an R1 or a, Booster or something like that, and you just want to be able to ride for longer periods of time and still have that benefit of the power that a 1000cc bike provides. I would definitely recommend this. And this bike also makes me feel like I'm a better rider. I don't know, it's because I feel like I earned riding 1000, but it's got this 6-axis thing. I forgot that's on the cluster too. It's an S, just like a PlayStation controller. It knows when you're sideways, and it can calculate your lean angle and all that crap, and it doesn't allow you to apply too much brake when you're in a corner. So none of my bikes were ever this smart, so I don't know how to really take that, but it makes me feel good that I can ride this bike with a decent amount of confidence, and I don't think it's all the bike. I think some of it's partially me. So that's it, done rambling. Thanks for watching.